this episode of A Soul's Quest podcast, Omar and I will discuss how thinking about the magnitude of space could help us broaden our perspective of life. Stay tuned. All right, so what are we talking about today? That's what you're going to ask,
one
right?
time to the beat. Yes. What are we talking about?
So what we're talking about today. So recently, William Shatner went to outer space. Go ahead, say it. I know you're going to say something funny. No?
What?
He didn't, not figuratively speaking, but literally.
I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Okay, you got to go back in that because I'm like, huh? I like, huh? Say what? He went, what? Say that again. Let's start all over again because.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about William Shatner's recent visit to outer space.
Okay. Now this time, literally,
not figuratively,
not in
not
image,
Star Trek,
not like he actually went there.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. And I watched a video about his experience when he came back from outer space.
Okay.
And his experience was, and I have my little cheat sheets, was that he had the strongest feelings of grief.
Do you have a quote?
That he's ever experienced.
No quote, just kind of like say that.
The strongest feelings of grief that he's ever experienced. I don't really have a quote, but that's what he said.
Okay.
And he said, I do have a quote actually. I take that back. Sorry.
It's all right.
You typed this up for me.
Yeah.
Okay. It was the death that I saw in space and the life force that I saw coming from the planet. The blue, the beige, the white, he said. And I realized one was death and the other was life. So what do you think he meant by that?
Yeah. This is not the first time that I've heard this, right? I remember watching The Power of Myth with Joseph Campbell and Bill Moyer, and you know, what is it about that? You know, it's like you look at the vastness and the vacuum of space, right? Mostly is, we're not going to argue whether it's empty or not, but it's you know, that is not for this episode. Right. But there is a vastness and emptiness that's out there, right? You know,
well, you talk. It's like when we watch The Pale Blue Dot,
correct?
And on those episodes of the cosmos and stuff like that, when you see like this, like I know for me, whenever I talk about like outer space with you, it's like it blows my mind thinking about like that we're this little planet in this like deep dark emptiness is what it looks like. There's nothing out there. You don't see anything. And so I can only imagine when I feel overwhelmed like that, I feel feelings, I get emotional. But why do you think that he had feelings of grief? Yeah,
because when you see that, when you know, the man is 90 years old, right? He's experienced and seeing things from conflicts, from the separation, everything that we're going through in our society and the things that we're fighting against, political separation, wars, the killing of each other, the mass extinction of pain that is caused in one group of that corner of that blue dots with another. When it makes you really, it puts things in perspective.
But so when you go, for him, he went to outer space.
Yeah.
And looking back, now he's in outer space, looking at the planet, the blue, the beige, the white, the grief that came to him and the feelings that were overwhelming for him were because of...
It's the realization, right, that in the vastness of space, in the vastness of all this darkness, this beautiful circular thing exists. And in that beautiful sphere, life and all that stuff happens, right? Now, this is not the first time that it's happened. I mean, it's called, this is actually called the overview effect. And I don't know if you have the notes because I forgot its name on
Frank White.
Frank White.
Author
Frank White. You know,
coined the term in 1987.
He coined the term in 1987.
Do you want me to tell you what it says?
Sure, go ahead, go ahead.
What he says is, there are no borders or boundaries on our planet except those that we create in our minds or through human behaviors.
Correct.
All the ideas and concepts that divide us when we are on the surface begin to fade from orbit and the moon. The result is a shift in worldview and in identity.
Exactly. So that's what happens is that, and this is why I found this article so intriguing and so interesting, because individually, as individuals, right, we have a certain scope of experience, a limited scope of experience, right? On a daily basis, we might travel maybe 15, 30 miles from where we live the majority of our life, right? And that is like one little speck of space in this sphere that is our planet, right? But based on that, and based on whatever ideas we might think, either individually, our identity, culturally, our political beliefs, and all that stuff, is just a small scope in the vastness of things. But if you really think about it, the thing that makes this so powerful is that we are willing to die for that. We are willing to cause harm and pain to ourselves, to others, to that sphere, to protect that little circumference that we think is the most important thing, or that idea, an idea that we think that is the most important thing that exists. Mm-hmm. So when you think about it, the shift of perspective and the shift of consciousness, when you see things from what I call an eagle's eye view, or what they call the overview effect, it's a shift that puts things really in perspective in terms of our existence, and the choice that we have. Mm-hmm. And that's what strikes me the most, right? Because ultimately there's a choice that you make. Because if you realize how we are just dangling, or like Carl Sagan said, a speck of dust, in the vastness of space, your choice is, on one extreme, so why should I care? Mm-hmm. I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do whatever I can to get what I can. Mm-hmm. And damn everybody, right? Mm-hmm. And some people might equate that to like Darwinism and the survival of the fittest, and this is how the world operates, mm-hmm. And that's one extreme, and there's a certain level of truth when it comes to that. Mm-hmm. On the other side, you could say, wow, I think it's my responsibility to cause a little bit less pains, because we all in this sphere together, right? And we're dangling in the middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And just recently, I just read yesterday that there's an asteroid that
I was just thinking.
You were just thinking about?
Literally. Mm-hmm. If an asteroid hits us and it's powerful enough to take us all out, we're all going down.
Well, there's an article out there right now. NASA mm-hmm. just put it out a couple of days ago about there is an asteroid out there that could be life-changing for our planet. Now there's not a possibility that it will hit us right away, but that possibility exists.
It is out there, yes, of course.
So when you're dangling in a speck of dust, suspended in space, then those two choices come about. And the question is like, we as humans, because we are the only species that is able to be cognizant enough and conscious enough to realize these things. The question is, how do we move forward? Are we going to continue to protect either our individual selves or an idea for a temporary spotlight, right, of success? Mm-hmm. That's the question, really. That is kind of like where we see it. So now the more important thing, the further question is, it's like most of us can't go to space, at least not yet.
Right. So that was going to be my next question. Yeah. William Shatner had this really remarkable opportunity to go to outer space mm-hmm. and experience this, and in our lifetime at least, because I'm going into the next half of my life here very soon. Because we're saying that, but the truth of the matter is that we're going to finish this episode, or people are going to watch this episode. They're going to click it off. They might think about it, and then they move on and they go back to doing what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Not to insult anybody or their intelligence, but it's the reality. We get sucked into our environment,
our sphere of living space. Yeah.
So then if that's the case, how do we shift our perspective if where we are is here? Mm-hmm. We're never going to leave Earth. Well, we will, but not in that way. We're not going to outer space. So how mm-hmm. do we shift our perspective in terms of sort of coming outside of ourselves?
Correct.
And thinking more about the planet and other people and generosity, because that's what we're talking about, right? Generosity, kindness.
It's not so much about that simple. I don't think it's that simple about generosity and kindness, because I think that there's a simplicity to that, but it's also the way that I've seen it implemented is that we begin to separate people versus good versus evil when we start kind of like moralizing a lot of these things, right? Mm-hmm. So like this is an individual shift in perspective, right? And there's a couple of ways that I've actually seen this that I could personally have not experienced it, because I'm not going to say that I have that same experience, because sometimes I want to punch somebody,
Me?
No, not you.
I'm kidding.
Not you. No, not you.
Road rage.
No, not even road rage. It's just like idiocy. There's things that bother me as a human being, because I'm just a human being, right? Okay. But this is the things that if you look at history enough and you start like comparing religions, there's a lot of beautiful things that religions that the founders, let me rephrase that the founders of those religions mentioned. Christ talked about, when they asked him what are the two greatest commandments, right? You love God above all and love your neighbor as you would thyself, right? Mm-hmm. There's a thing in there about the importance of treating each other with respect. And not so much each other with respect, but also our environments with respect. This is what I love about a lot of primitive cultures. Native Americans did the buffalo dance when they killed buffalo. Why? There was a reverence and a thankfulness and a balance between those type of things.
Right.
We are so caught up in our advancement of society and the things that we want individually, that we forget that we're just dangling in a speck of dust. So one way to realize that same type of mentality is, number one, it's like going to nature. I love when we visit a city, when we go to cities. I don't like going to cities anymore, because I feel that they all look pretty much the same. You have different little things here and there, something to see. But what I like about going to different cities or different places is looking at the topography of it all, like nature aspects of it. It's like there's no artist that could make me feel like when I see like the Grand Canyon, like that's something that is completely unbelievable, when you see in our yards, we have a lot of birds coming in. We have woodpeckers, and I'm going to be charging them rent pretty soon, because
butterflies.
And you see the beauty in nature, and you see the grandeur of nature and how this thing works.
It does work, because the other day we went for a walk, and this time we decided we were going to go to the beach and we're going to walk on the sand, and it was like sunset. It was beautiful outside, beautiful weather right now in Florida. And as we were sitting there, even though we were talking, I was just thinking, my God, like you're looking out at the ocean, like it's forever. You just keep going. It's forever. And it's like, wow. And we were talking about how the waves were really strong, and I'm like, I would never go in the ocean at this point. It does make you, it sort of humbles you.
Yeah. And exactly.
And gives you this perspective of, I'm just this fragile person, and I'm like less than a speck of dust on this speck of dust.
And the thing is, it's not to feel diminished.
No.
Because a lot of people will look at it, it's like, what's my purpose of being here? It's like, if this is going to happen, it's like, because again, when you start looking at situations and you start looking at things, you begin to develop like a spectrum of ideas, right? Some of them you start minimizing who you are as a person, because in the grand scheme of things, we're somewhat insignificant, right? But that's one conclusion. And again, I'm hesitant to say that's a wrong conclusion or a right conclusion, but that's a conclusion. Another conclusion, and it's like, wow, look at the beauty that out of all the atoms and all the cells and everything that could happen potentially in this vastness, you're here. Like, yeah, and I have issues accepting that myself sometimes. Like I have issues kind of like accepting the fact that it's like, wow, it's cool to live in a place and time because somehow everything came together for me and the people around me to be here, but when you look at nature, that nature gives you, and I don't mean nature just like I'm just going to go to the park and look at it. You could do that, but it's like when you go into nature, and I remember this when I was a Boy Scout, we were camping in the Catskills, and there was a thunderstorm, and I remember this night because I was up all night, and it was a thunderstorm in the Catskills, and you heard, like, it felt so overwhelming, and it was beautiful, right? Because it was just raining and you hear the lightning and the thunder, and it was like nonstop, and it was just loud, and there was no noise. It was dark because there's no, you were in the woods, and that was just so powerful to me, and I like that part.
So you're talking about really experiencing nature, not just going to because I mean, and you can just go to the beach you could do and that really too. Have an experience there.
Yeah, you could do that too. I mean, and I think there's a lot of people that have exposed to nature, and they're able to see its beauty, that they're able to see its power, and they're able to see like the interconnectedness of it all, because it's like like for instance, we live in Florida. One of the biggest issues that we have in Florida is pythons. Like people just buy them because they want them as a pet, and they say they can't realize it, so they throw them in the Everglades. And look how much that has cost, like individuals selfishly thinking that, oh, I could take, this is a pet. And again, yes, you have your freedom to do that. But here's the thing about freedom, and I said this before, I'm going to say it again because I love this quote from Alan Watts. It's like, freedom is dangerous. Because a true moral act, it's not an act that we are bound to do, but it's an act that we are free to do. So even though I might want to do that because I just want a pet, and I have the freedom to do so, right? To be, a moral person is to realize if I do that and I cannot take care of it, I'm going to go ahead and just dispose it. There's no responsibility.
It happens
in that.
all the time.
But it causes havoc in our environment. Partly look in Florida. It's like, the species are destroying the Everglades, right? So these are the reasons why looking at things from that big perspective, it gives us another point of view that we do have a responsibility.
Right. That's a good way to put it, because when you do things like that, you're being selfish. You're just doing it because you just want it. That's instant gratification. I got to have it right now. And what you're saying is to step back and think about what my actions and what my decisions are going to, what's that exponential effect.
Exactly.
And I think that's important. So you're saying then that if you go into to get this to shift in perspective, one of the ways that we can do that is by going into nature, getting in touch with that, sort of observing things around us. And
another one really that kind of helps me quite a bit is like just meditating, and meditation is not, again, if we get too caught up in concepts and ideas and all this stuff, like we begin to lose the purpose. Why do you meditate? Like, why do you sit there and listen to your body breathing? It's like there's a connection there, at least for me, and I'm not, the expert meditator or anything like that, but there's a peace that you feel if you once you get past the muck and the fear and the loneliness of that emptiness of space, right? Because when you meditate, you're quiet and you feel that emptiness, you feel that void, and it's a scary feeling when you're there. But once you begin to see the beauty of it and begin to see the connection to the outer and the inner, it's pretty interesting, So that's like the second way. The third way that I think that it's cool to kind of like gain this type of the overview kind of perspective is to really think, and I wouldn't say think about space, but learning about space, So, we talked about the cosmos. I love the first with Carl Sagan. I watched it all the time. Watched it. I remember We quoted quite a bit. Love the pale blue dot. I love the new one with Neil deGrasse Tyson. Our honeymoon was Kennedy Space Center.
Yeah. Part of it, yeah.
Part of it was, because it's interesting to start like really reflecting on it and seeing it from that different point of view. It's seeing it from that, like, wow. If you think about it, we live in a galaxy out of unknown amount of galaxies. We have trillions of galaxies, but nobody knows exactly. They're saying that the universe is expanding. So we live in a corner of a galaxy with I think is millions of billions of stars, right? When you just start thinking about that, yes, it makes you feel small. Like, oh my God, my life is completely insignificant, right? That's one of the conclusions that you could draw. I'm given, right? But another conclusion that you could draw is, like I said before, it's like, wow, I'm here, and a responsibility to make this a better place, or make it so that I don't cause as much pain, might be a good possibility too. You could have the hedonism on one side, or you could have like the spiritual experience in which it encompasses others. Like you have that spectrum, and the matter is like, how do you choose? Right. Like, what do you do? And that's ultimately the point that somebody has to make. Like, I'm not too much into the systemic, like this is how you got to do it. But I think contemplating about it and experiencing about it will bring things out of you, which will fall within that spectrum, and it's up to you to do that, and it's up to you to experience that.
And I would argue, or not even argue, because it's not an argument, but just add to this whole thing, because when you talk about going into nature and experiencing things and meditation and whatever it is that makes you, like, sort of separates you and brings you to that place where you can observe your not only your surroundings, but even observe yourself in that surrounding, right? That I think that it takes a level of self-awareness. Yeah. Because you have to be aware enough to know, ooh, I'm really deep into whatever's going on right now, and I'm not paying attention to anything, and things are just happening and whatever. And I think when you realize that and know, okay, it's time for me to step back, got to take a break, got to time out, you know what I mean? Yeah. That you can then say, I need to go for a walk. I need to go to the beach. I need to take a little, camping trip, whatever that is. Go for a drive. Sometimes just going for a drive, and or sit and meditate, or journal, or sort of write down these things that you become. You increase your self-awareness, and I think that is the foundation. I mean, speaking as an expert, that is the foundation of having these experiences and realizing these things, right? So
we live in a world right now that is all about identity politics and political points of views and all these points of views, right? And what you see in Shatner's fear and feelings of emptiness and the void is the fact that it's like, wow, from this perspective, everything is so fragile.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's like,
but we don't see that.
No, we don't.
Our daily.
We don't get to see that. We fight with so much
we're rigid.
fervor.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
To protect our idea.
Right.
Keep it for me. And keep it, and it's like us against them. It doesn't matter which spectrum it goes. It's like, but it's so fragile, right? And life is so fragile, because even in our immediate cosmic neighborhood, we haven't been able to find life like it exists here, So when you start looking at things like that from that grand point of view, the question is, how do you bring it down to a life on a regular basis?
Practical,
And again, my only thing is that I don't think that systemically. I think it could be done systemically, but systems don't work without individuals. And the most powerful thing that could change things, it's individuals in the way that we act on a daily basis.
Right.
in the way that we interact with other human beings, but also with that immediate environment and the environment that we're around.
Yeah, it's cause and effect.
It is. It is that aspect of cause and effect. If you really want this, and so you gotta look at both, because I don't think that to be a well-rounded person, you have to look at your individual scope and sphere of influence, but also you got to see at the whole big picture as to, okay, how does this all fit in the universal scheme, right. And that's the shift that needs to happen. And I remember in that Joseph Campbell, Bill Moyer conversation in The Power of Myth about, because there was a picture that Joseph Campbell had of the Earth from outer space. I think one of the Apollo missions took a picture, and they brought it back from outer space. And he was saying the same things, that you don't see any division there, you don't see any country lines, or you don't see anything like that. It's just one big thing. And it's like, why is it that why shouldn't, instead of thinking about this family and that family, why don't we start thinking about number one, the human family, but also the Earth family. Now this is a very, because I see some people, but that's a very Care Bear thing to say, right?
It's shooting out of me right now.
Exactly, right? Like love spurring out of your heart is very like a kumbaya thing.
Really
this is a doggy dog world. It's like, but yes.
And a lot of people are going to say that when they hear us talking about
from
this.
A certain point of view, there is a truth to that. And yet, we are the only species that has the power, the capability, and the potential to act differently, to choose differently, and not behave like animals. Right? So having that power, and again, knowing that, this is where freedom comes in, right? Again, it's like, I love it because all this stuff like coincides, because a true moral act is not because we are bound to do it, it's because we are free to do it. So if we know that, if we understand it, how we have so much power, how we are so capable of doing these things, we continue to do the same things that damaging the only place that we could live in right now.
Yeah.
It's
all we got.
It's like, it's all we got, and we are all we got. Sound like the New Jack City. We all we got. CMB. So it's just very interesting. But I think that looking at that article, understanding what the overview effect is.
I think definitely you should put links on if people haven't been able to watch the video or read the article. Yeah. It's a very moving article, and if you really take a moment to just kind of ingest that and then digest it, just to kind of understand what's actually being said. And then just to recap, in order to get that perspective, because we're talking about it from an outer space perspective, but to have that same perspective here on Earth is to basically the things that you're talking about, increasing our self-awareness and understanding that we're on this planet, it's fragile, that we are fragile as individuals.
Correct.
And then, experiencing nature, taking a pause, taking a break, a time out from, all the chaos and stuff that happens in our life, and sort of removing ourselves from that to see that there's more to our life than just that immediate stuff that we're going through, and that there are other people that are experiencing things that are either worse or better or whatnot than our own life. And then you said, meditating. I know that's something that I have a lot of difficulty doing, but sometimes I think that when I can just sit somewhere, if not breathing and doing exercises, but just, I think meditating comes in different forms. It can be just sitting on a bench somewhere and just, being in that moment, and experiencing that moment.
And to finish that, because I want to finish on this note, because you talked about meditation, and it's like this, and many of those work. But one of the things that I Joseph Campbell is one of the biggest influences in my life, reading him and understanding, like watching a lot of his talks. But one of the things that he says, all of life is meditation, and or like Alan Watts once asked him, what is your yoga? And he says, underlying sentences, because that's he likes. He read other mythologies and he on the road a lot of things, and that's what it is. It's finding that thing that you do that connects you, to the whole, and it could be insignificant to others, but it's important to you,
right?
Because that is what connects you to the world.
We hope you enjoyed the episode. Comment below with your thoughts and remember to stay connected by sharing and subscribing.